Hello and welcome to another episode of It Came From the Page. And today, first off, I just want to say thank you guys for letting me reach 1,000 subscribers. Wow! I literally couldn't have done it without you, so I appreciate all of the subscribers. So before we get into the point of this video, I did have a question to ask, which is what you want. What you want in celebration? What do you want for celebration of me hitting 1K? What are the types of things that you think would be appropriate for a 1K celebration video? I mean, I've done a Q&A in the past. I don't know if I'm that interesting to Q or A. But if there's a special video idea that you would like me to see, anything that you would like to see for a celebration of 1K, please put it in the comments below, because I want to treat you for treating me so nicely. So now let's get to the point of this video. And this is more of a just like kind of a general topic video more than being a very like well thought out piece by piece examination of a topic. But I thought this would just be an interesting topic to talk about just to Booktube as a whole, which is the fact that almost every medium except for books is properly archived. So books are, and I mean, when I say archived, I don't mean just in a inaccessible to the public warehouse somewhere, because like I know there's tons of like reference libraries that are really hard to get into, that have like many books, like the Library of Congress, stuff like that, that are not accessible for everyone. I mean easily accessible from a user's perspective of you as a person being able to go out and get whatever book it is that is either not available anymore or harder to find. So when I say this, let's talk about other mediums first. So, going back to one of the ones that would be probably the most likely to be forgotten in time and lost forever, video games. Video games are on cartridges that are really, especially when as farther you go back, there's like disc systems and a whole bunch of other different variations of what you use to play a video game. But what I'm saying is they are almost always designed for a very limited amount of time because they're built to work with a device that is eventually going to be out of style, and there's going to be a new device that replaces it, and the old device has a limited shelf life because if it breaks, you can't easily get a new one. So think like Nintendo, NES to Super Nintendo, the SNES, that upgraded system there, as you're meant to play the newest 16-bit games and say goodbye to the 8-bit ones. But those games are archived forever by people who create things called ROMs, which are like a way that you can download and old video games to play on modern hardware. And as such, those video games don't disappear. Like there are occasionally things like rights issues, because like the idea of archiving, especially with video games, there are tons of rights issues as far as legality goes. I am a person who, that's not a big concern of mine. If I can't pay for something legally anymore, then I just getting it whatever way possible is to me, it's just completely fine. I have no moral quandaries about like, not being able to play the old Ultraman video game on Super Nintendo if I just download a ROM. Like to me, there's like no, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that personally. You might disagree, which is fair, but those old video games are still always going to be available in some form or the other because someone bothered to archive them. Next, go on to movies. Movies are one of the things that are the most archived. Now, there's certainly tons of lost media with video games too, but with movies especially, a lot of movies, they kind of got destroyed during like World War II. Certain things died. Oh no, cat's behind the thing. Why is the cat behind the thing? Little kitten, come here. Many movies got destroyed in various formats, but as long as it's hit some publicly consumable format, VHS, DVD, Laserdisc, whatever it is, Blu-ray, whatever, there is a really high chance that it has been archived somewhere. And a lot of times it's in very unsuspecting places. So I recently read the book Bleeding Skull, a 1980s horror trash odyssey, and you would be amazed by the amount of movies that were really small distribution that are still available today because somebody uploaded them to YouTube. Again, the legality of it all comes into front. You know me, I don't care. But even older things like, there are some VHSs that I found from that book, Bleeding Skull, that I couldn't find on YouTube, and I couldn't find a DVD to buy, or Blu-ray or anything like that. When it comes to movies, I always encourage you buy the legal version of it, just because that money actually goes back to the filmmakers and stuff like that. But some of them are just maybe there was a Blu-ray but it was out of print, so the movie Offerings. So I had to go and I find an old VHS for the movie Offerings. But because VHS was a mass marketed thing, there was tons of VHS out there, I could get it for like $20. It's not a big deal. You're not breaking the bank. Now there are VHSs that you could, if you want the VHS version, you're gonna break the bank, like Tales from the Quadead Zone, Devil Doll from the Black Devil Doll from Hell, I believe it's called. Some of those movies, those VHSs are incredibly expensive, going up for over $500 online. But you can still find those movies other ways and easier ways than going back to get the VHS. So that I don't have as much of an issue with that, because it is a collector's market for VHS. So if you're going to pay out that much money, you can find it elsewhere. You want the physical VHS to complete a collection or to show off or whatever. That's your prerogative. That's cool. The art is available elsewhere. Comic books. Almost all comic books have been archived. Most of those are not legally. It's really hard to find legal comic book archives unless people are reprinting things. But the main point is, again, if you can't buy it legally, I have no problem with it. Then we go to books. Books are vintage books especially, are so incredibly expensive. And it's a very odd thing and a very depressing thing from the perspective of art, in that, like, there's all of these things that are lost to time, essentially, because they're almost impossible to find online. And the things that you can find online, they go upwards of like $100. So, for example, there's a book that I've been searching for years called The Rivals of King Kong. It's a short story collection put together by Michael Perry, I believe, and it was only limitedly released. There was The Rivals of Frankenstein as well, which I do have, and there was The Rivals of something else. I don't remember what the third one was called, but it was in this system, and there were short stories that were kind of collected based on a specific theme. There is one eBay listing for it, and it's over $100, and there's nowhere else online you can find it. That $100, if I were to sell it out, which is, I'm not going to do that because that's way too much money for me, that money does not go to the publishers. That money does not go to any of the people who wrote the short story. It goes to someone online who found it and is reselling it. Which, like, if people are going to pay for it, you can't really be too persnickety about, like, being like, I can't believe they're selling it. Well, I mean, if people are paying... Kitten just knocked down Seinfeld. Good thing Seinfeld is available elsewhere, because it's not a DVD. So if I lose Seinfeld, I can watch... Sorry, because it's not a book. So if I have that version of Seinfeld gets destroyed, it's not a big deal. But if that was a very expensive book that a cat just jumped and destroyed, it would be heartbreaking, because those are very expensive online. And it's just this thing where you want to read some of these, like, forgotten pieces of ephemera. And, like, a lot of these books, when I'm talking about books that I'm searching for, they're not high quality, high class books. They're normally of a more trashy, meant to be read for fun, that kind of thing, variety. Things that, so for example, there was this series of books called the Dark Future books. These books were connected to Games Workshop, who also did Warhammer and Warhammer Fantasy. They had a car-based board game, role-playing game type of thing. They built a big universe around it, and there was a bunch of books to release to coincide with the product. Now, those books, the first few books, you can actually find for decently cheap because they were reprinted a few times. But when they went over to Black Flame Publishing, which also did the bunch of the books for the Jason X series and the Jasons and the Freddys, and there was a bunch of movie tie-in books created by Black Flame that are almost all now impossible to find, but I'll get into that for a second. That the Dark Future released more original books for that Black Flame line, and those books now are very hard to find because there's so few listings for them, and they've kind of gone up in smoke. And not these ones are an example of books that don't sell for super high prices online, but they're just really hard to find. They're just really hard to find, some of these, and some of the ones that weren't available in a thrift books are just gone forever. And maybe someone will find them somewhere sometime, but there's no eBay listings for them. There's no A-Books listings for them. There's these books that are just gone forever from time. And I don't believe they're gone forever. Someone will find one of the copies, and people who are looking for them will eventually complete the collections. But there's only so many of those out there, and eventually there won't be any more for someone to complete a collection with. Especially if you've had a low print run. I'm going to guess those Black Flame books, especially since all of their horror stuff goes up. I can't imagine there's more like 10,000 of those that were printed. Maybe there was more. I don't have the exact numbers, but when you think about the fact that a lot of those were in the early 2000s, books get burned, just from normal things and also abnormal things. I don't know. Parents could just be like, I can't believe you're in this Death Moon from Jason X. Burn. But, books are not around forever. There's mold that can be involved. There's just wear and tear, flooding, all manner of things. And if you would think about it, really, there's probably about 1,000 out of a 10,000 book range left. Maybe more, maybe less. The point is, eventually those will all disappear, and these books will disappear forever. And unlike comic books, movies, video games, these are not archived. Sometimes you can find a library that has them, and then you can get an interlibrary loan. That's how I read Cold Front by Barry Hammond. In Canada, there is one library that has it, and I put an interlibrary loan in, and I got it, and I read it that way. Elsewise, you would never, ever be able to read that book for an affordable price. It's very rarely listed online anywhere, and when it is, it's for crazy, crazy money. And these are books that are interesting enough to get people's attention, and people want to read them because somebody found them and they did a review on them on BookTube, or they talked about them somewhere, but they're just really expensive online and impossible to find. And I know that a lot of the archive movements that I was talking about, in terms of especially with video games and comic books, the archivists it's mainly piracy. But the piracy is going to make it so that those things don't actually disappear, whereas books don't even really have that for old vintage stuff. Now, unfortunately, there are tons of piracy for modern, easy-to-find books, and if you have a library, use your library. There's so many other ways to, read newer books. Stealing newer books is kind of abhorrent, especially when they're available everywhere for so cheap. I mean, if you're on a budget, half the time Audible will do sales where if you sign up for an Audible account, you get it for a month, you get it for $1. You know what I mean? It's possible to find new books everywhere. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't want to be encouraging people to pirate new books, because that's insane. No, I'm talking about old out-of-print books that all the money, when you go and you try to purchase these books, don't go to any of the original creators. It goes to somebody who sold them online. Now, admittedly, I am also part of the problem because I have sold books at higher prices online because I needed money. But in all those cases, what I did is I listed it for lower price and then put it on eBay, and the bidding wars went up, up, and up, and up, and up. And at that point, you can't feel too bad if you write a book. If you list a book and someone wants to pay high prices for it, that's their own prerogative. But it would still be better for those books to be available for everyone and have it be cheaper and accessible to everyone. And that's something that really does not happen in books. The only reason I sold some of the books that I did sell is because they were archived. So, for example, I parted with my Jason X books. I had 3 Jason X books, and I parted with them because I just needed money. And I parted with them, and that guy got quite a bit of money for them online. And the only reason I sold them is because I could go back and listen to Slash Tracks, which is the YouTube channel that archives these very hard to find books and has somebody read them out loud and put them out in an audiobook format so everyone can go back and read these very hard to find books. They have made the longevity of these books actually possible because so many people have never been able to afford or find or read these books, and now they can. And obviously it would be way better if people were able to pay the publishers and they reprinted all these, but especially when you're talking about like old movie tie-in books, stuff like that, to untangle the rights issues can sometimes be very difficult. Now, I have been talking a lot about more trashy books, obviously, but that's not the only thing that gets this treatment and is very hard to find. There are books that are going to be of really high quality, high production value, worthwhile pieces of art that were very hard to find for years. Take Notice by Heather Lewis. This was a book that, like Criminale, basically helped to get republished and get people talking about this book and get people able to read this book again. And for years, this is a book that was really, really hard to find and hard to track down and hard to read if you were a person who, just wanted to read this book. And it's meant to be a very hard-hitting book that has a lot of real artistic value. Now, obviously, I don't view whether or not something needs to be archived by its worth in terms of art, but I'm just trying to point out the fact that the archiving is also very difficult for great books, just as much as it is for trashy books. I have more experience with trashy books because that's what I'm mainly into. So, like, I am always upset when I'm trying to find a novelization for, like, say, Visiting Hours by Kent Rambo, Hoi Fada Doi Fada, which is a fun slasher. Well, that's not a fun slasher movie. It is a 1980s slasher movie that is very hard-hitting and hard to watch, but is really, really great, I think. I think that's a great movie, and I would love to read the audiobook, but or the physical book, obviously, not just the audiobook, because no one's done an audiobook for it. But it's selling for upwards of $100 online. And these are the issues. Now, are there solutions for this? Well, sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. So archive.org has recently been allowing libraries to archive some of their books and put it available for rental through a library system digitally. There was a lot of pushback by certain publishers about this, though, and there were some legal battles and things of that ilk. So it's unclear whether or not that system will continue or some of those books are just going to start disappearing. But there are quite a few hard-to-find, difficult books that are archived on archive.org and through their library systems. Take a book like Joyride, which is this hard-to-find 80s slasher book. It is available on archive.org. Now, how long that will be is a big question. There was also the big Google Books digitization format and movement that seemed to have digitized many books, but most of them are not available to the public. It's one of those, it seems like it's a private library, and I don't know. I think there were some rights issues as to why they couldn't make that all that stuff available to the public. But that is one of the movements that kind of went to archive a bunch of books, but we never got that from the public perspective. There are a bunch of books that you can find, hey, yeah, this does exist in a digital format for Google Books because it was digitized by Google Books, but you can't access it, and no one else can either. And that's a big problem, because it's like, what is the point of a book existing out there if no one can read it? So this is just a discussion about books that will disappear and how that's sad. I hope you guys are having a good day, and I will talk to you later. Goodbye.